Let's go. Welcome to the official Get At Me Dog podcast. Get At Me Dog, real rap. Home of the brave, where we joke, but we don't play. Home of revolutionary masculinity, where we speak truth to power in defense of and for the furtherance of our God-given human rights. And I'm your host, Craig Maurice Broadhead. Full government, because we don't run, we reload. Before we get started here with episode 3, I want to do some quick housekeeping. To all my listeners, my deepest gratitude for taking your time out of your daily schedules to listen to my podcast. Please make sure you follow and subscribe, like, share content. And if you're a YouTube viewer, please go to your preferred podcast streaming platform as well and follow and download also. And vice versa. If you're an audio podcast listener and you enjoy listening to podcasts during your daily commute or while doing work around the home or while working at home, please also go to YouTube and subscribe to my podcast. The links to all the various platforms are in my bios on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and I use my government name, as you know, Craig Maurice Broadhead or Craig M. Broadhead on all platforms. If you support the message and movement, please tell your family and friends about it, because really this is a grassroots word of mouth movement. You know, we live in a surveillance society, so the information I'm covering isn't the most popular. If I were here talking about the music industry and interviewing celebrities about all the dirt I know, having been in the industry for years, the podcasts and clips would be all over TMZ and the Shade Room, but that's not my calling. It's not my thing. Over here, we're about building something special and uplifting for our people and families and communities and exposing lies that truly matter to the lives of all Americans, not gossip and ratchet news and tidbits. But let's get started. And before we get started, though, a few things just popped in my head, before we get down to business. Why does this administration and its supporters have no issue mouthing the words anti-Semitism, but are deathly averse to saying the word or acknowledging racism? Just asking for a friend. Or why does this administration and its supporters and all the talking heads on TV today have no issue defending or saying protect Jewish students on campus because of the student protest, but couldn't and wouldn't and still won't say Black Lives Matter, even in the face of deaths of Black students and Black people in general? Just asking for a neighbor. Have you seen how brazen and callous and violent this administration has been towards so-called illegal immigrants? Have you seen the videos smashing car windows with sledgehammers, snatching up mothers and fathers from in front of schools and hospitals or churches or their places of business? And but they're taxpayers. These ICE agents, and you look in their faces, you can see the disdain and anger, a certain thrill for the chase and capture in their eyes. This is just a taste of what Black Americans have endured from the beginning. Much like our history with law enforcement in our communities, ICE doesn't care about you, your rights, or whether or not you live or die. This administration is breaking and skirting laws in order to achieve whatever it wants, but they want to talk about immigration law and do nothing about it. Well, I say F your laws if they're unjust. Remember, slavery was the law. Segregation was the law. Human beings have every right to disregard any unjust law or practice that violates their human rights and dignity. How about finally fix immigration law already and provide legal pathways to citizenship? They aren't trying to fix the problem. They intend to exacerbate it because they are afraid of the population trends. Welcome to episode 3, United States of Scandal. Shout out to Jake Tapper. You stick to the skin deep topics. I'm going to dive right to the bone, to the meat of the matter. I am America's worst nightmare. A revolutionary-minded Black man born from the womb of a white woman. The darkening of America. That's really what all the chaos is about today. It's what has Trump's minions like Steve Miller and Bannon scrambling to preserve their way of life. What has those who subscribe to white supremacist ideologies' panties all in a bunch. It's what's behind their obsession with the border and their rush to deport immigrants of color with little regard for due process. All you have to do is look at the numbers. From 2010 to 2020, the percentage of the population that identifies as white alone, non-Hispanic, decreased from 63.7% to 57.8%. They are so frightened at the prospect of slipping below 50% in these United States of America. They're alarmed because the Hispanic population is growing at a much faster rate than the so-called white population. Thus, this overemphasis on the southern border and the deportation of immigrants from Mexico, Central and South America. And let me tell you, I believe the true number is lower than that if human beings would wake up and reject the lie of a white race. Because within that distorted concept, they've lumped individuals who identify with nationalities or ethnic groups originating in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. You know, I really have to sit down and put together an entire episode just on this concept of race, and by extension, racism. Its true meaning. You'd be amazed just how twisted what you've been taught really is. They list certain North African nationalities, ethnic groups as Caucasian, so that they can claim their civilizations and accomplishments as being a part of their master white race theory. You just can't make this up. Even the term Middle East is a fairly recent creation of theirs, because historically it was universally known as North Africa. Look at all the old maps. It's just like Trump saying he's renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, to make himself and some shallow Americans feel better about themselves. This is how powerful white men have lied, faked, and distorted history and history books forever. Research for yourself. They do this to physically and psychologically separate the origins of the world's earliest civilizations and religions from originating in Africa. It's completely insane. Racism and anti-black ideologies are a mental illness, a deep psychosis. It was done to trick you into accepting false narratives and beliefs about yourself and concerning which people hold historical roots to certain lands in North Africa and the Middle East. It's a quite sinister plot to grant European rights to lands under false pretenses. The Bible says that God's people fight not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil. So when you see a nation or a people calling themselves God's people, yet they're attacking God's children, innocent civilians, then you know they are not of God. You don't hear me? That's a topic for another episode. Some people are so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. Get your heads out the clouds, because the air you're breathing is polluted. Craig, you ain't talk but you preach, boy. To be black and sane and conscious, grounded and rooted in reality, spiritually free, with a revolutionary mindset in this country, is to be in a perpetual state of war with yourself and the world around you, because you see through the lies, the distortions, the misrepresentations, the facades. You hear all their wonderful words, morals, ethics, freedoms, rights, liberties, but you understand their actions. State-sponsored terrorism, covert wars and actions, assassinations, genocide. And this war that I have in is less with people and more with governments and systems and ideologies and corporations and media and their leadership. In my experiences, I found the overwhelming majority of people to be decent people. At bottom, most people want the same opportunities, hold similar outlooks and aspirations, hopes and dreams for themselves, for their children, their family and friends. It's the so-called ruling class of politics and major corporations that I'm at odds with. I stand on the fact that when God chooses you, you see things as they are, not how they pretend for them to be. And you cannot just ignore it and simply go about living your life. I tried that. You must be obedient. You ask yourself, why didn't the momentous God-driven movements of the late 50s, the 60s, and early 70s not continue to plow forward and wholly transform this nation in which we live? Why didn't the ensuing generations pick up the mantle from Emmett Till, the tragic murder of an innocent black boy that's symbolic of the scores of deaths of black boys, girls, men, and women at the hands of hateful American white supremacist Christian domestic terrorists, including members of the KKK, law enforcement agencies, police groups, town and municipal mayors and officers, state governors and presidents, all with our blood on their hands? Why didn't we run the race like Medgar and Malcolm and Martin and even JFK and RFK for that matter, or Lumumba, Little Bobby Hutton, Fred Hampton, and Nkrumah and Huey? Why didn't we carry the baton through the finish line with style and force and purpose and grace like Sha'Carri did in the Paris Olympics? Why did the movement stall out? Why have we been seemingly roaming in the wilderness ever since, enjoying the fruits of their labor, while somewhat allowing the progress achieved to distract us from taking our eyes off the ultimate prize, which is the complete and total transformation of this society into a more perfect union that its documents claim it to be? I submit to you this because the system is operating in the manner it was originally designed to, which is to quell dissent and the overall progress or complete acceptance of Black Americans as citizens. Because if you're viewed as a citizen, you don't need special laws. If I'm a citizen, I don't need you to come and spell out special laws or grant me my rights. If you're viewed as a citizen, you automatically receive the rights of citizenship. So unless we address the roots, the foundation this house is built on, the home will never be on solid ground. The American system and its leading actors achieved their desired results. Nearly all the names I mentioned earlier met a violent death at the hands of government agents, whether directly or indirectly through its intermediaries. And the intended message rang out. It echoed, it reverberated loud and clear throughout Black communities and Black organizations and civil rights campaigns. Authentic Black political, economic, and social freedom equates to death. As long as you only talk surface level Black and white dynamics in America, you're fine. As long as you only talk about integrating toilets and bathrooms and lunch counters, you're fine. It's an extreme culture shift and an annoyance, but you're fine. As long as you're just wanting to sit on the front of the bus, you're fine. A disturbance, an inconvenience, but they can ultimately live with that. But if you evolve and expand your struggle and vision beyond just the surface Black-white issues, if you push too hard and your message begins to open too many eyes, including the masses of poor and working class people in America, if you connect your movement with other movements of oppressed peoples around the world and your aims to disrupt America strikes too deeply at the core of this government's true political, economic, and social mechanisms of violence, manipulation, and control, you will be eradicated. You will be neutralized, killed, shot down. Hence, we witness and history has recorded the complete psychological, physical, spiritual, and emotional castration and lynching of a people and movement. Let me break it down for you. Just as slave owners made examples of brave, rebellious Blacks whom they enslaved whenever they protested or resisted enslavement by gathering together all the Black captives that they had enslaved on their plantation and forced them to witness a cruel public torture or beating or flogging, whippings, maimings, dismemberments even, or hangings in order to stoke fear in their hearts and minds of any other among them that might have visions of escaping or resisting, to keep other Black people enslaved on their plantation in line by forcing them to witness a brutal public display of how these criminal white slave owners would respond to dissent or escape attempts, in an effort to ensure that Black people's physical, mental, psychological, and spiritual fear of death and torture was greater than their longing to be free men, women, and children, to guarantee that the fear of the repercussions for attempting to gain freedom and rights was far greater than their longing to be and live free. Well, in the late 50s and 60s and early 70s, this government's law enforcement apparatus called plays from the same playbook that slave owners read from and executed a plan to break the will and spirit of the great leaders of the civil rights and Black power movements and the brothers and sisters of the cause. They delivered a resounding message to any would-be leaders who attempted to step into their shoes. Comply or die. You've gone far enough. You can sit on toilets next to us. You can drink from the same fountain. You can eat at the same restaurants and sleep in the same hotels, maybe even live in some of our neighborhoods and attend some of our schools. But don't get too full of yourself. Don't mess with the real power and control of the masses of everyday American citizens. And since then, since their very public and publicized assassinations, their brutal murders, we've had an overabundance of placating, soft leaders who have been co-opted by the system. They have lulled us to sleep with the progress of having a seat at the table, presenting that as a sign of change and advancement. And we've spent about 50 years now celebrating having access to a seat at a table that serves meals tainted with poison, which continue to kill us just more slowly. Accepting a slow, steady death of decency, dignity, human rights. They've convinced us that having a seat at the table is progress because we can then change the system from within. Well, I say they have severely miscalculated not only the design of the system, but also the powers that be and their ability for meaningful and lasting change. And we're getting what should be expected outcome. Because if you truly understand the society and rule Americans live under, similar to the cruel and inhumane methods that American slave masters used to strip once proud, resourceful, civilized, cultured, advanced African captives of their humanity and will to resist enslavement, to become more accepting, docile, more obedient, more compliant captives and workers. This government and its lead law enforcement agencies, under the instructions of the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, conducted an equally as atrocious and horrid campaign of terror and violence and brutality and death against civil rights and Black Power movement leadership and members. Hoover, FBI agents, state troopers, county sheriff, city and town police officers conducted a criminal, unconstitutional, and illegal domestic war against American citizens. And this should infuriate and alarm every American citizen, because to this very moment, no one has ever been held accountable for their criminal and unconstitutional actions. These agencies conducted unlawful surveillance of all the prominent civil rights and Black Power organization members and leaders. They entrapped, framed, convicted, and imprisoned many members for crimes that they did not commit. They stoked division and animosity among and between various organizations with false propaganda campaigns. They created paranoia and friction between the members and among organizations, falsely labeling one another as police operatives. They firebombed offices and headquarters. They performed drive-bys, emptying their clips into apartments, homes, offices, headquarters. They brutalized and murdered members and assassinated leaders in cities throughout this nation. Leaders that they deemed on a path to becoming too powerful, holding too much influence among the people. They employed wartime tactics that completely dismantled organizations and neutralized leaders, and no one has ever been held accountable for these actions. Today, they love to talk about Venezuela or Honduran or Mexican or Salvadorian gangs or cartels, when the largest gang and or cartels in the world are governments and their law enforcement apparatus. Get out your feelings and listen clearly to what I'm telling you. Don't get defensive. Don't get defensive about your government and shut out truths I'm reporting to you. I'm sharing Black American and American history with you. Research the facts for yourself. This isn't propaganda. This isn't a smear campaign. This is the history they want hidden from you. Critical race theory, what a joke. There's no such thing. What I'm telling you is, this is no theory, it's fact. I could care less about theories. Your lies have brought us to a critical brink in American history. It's utterly crazy how some people need no proof to believe all the lies they've been taught from birth, but demand and even deny endless proof of the truth. Why do you think they're so fearful of real history being taught? Why do you think they don't want the lion-grabbing pen and paper and telling America's entire story? Exposing their tales, their lies, the fairy tales they've presented as truths, the fish stories they've passed off as education. This administration is a blessing in disguise. The chaos created, it should open many eyes. Trump and his minions are purposely manufacturing chaos because they really have nothing to offer. They have no vision for the future, no ideas. They just long to return to the past by tearing down all the progress that we have built. It's like this administration is stuck in a time warp and longing to return to those times. And hopefully it causes many to question and research the true intent behind their actions. Why do you think most Black Americans bristle when Trump and his supporters yell, "Make America Great Again"? Because once again, Black Americans aren't included in that scenario. If you're saying again, when has America ever been great for or to Black Americans? During the 246 plus years of slavery from 1619 to the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865? Or maybe it was during the Reconstruction period following the Civil War, where the government laid the foundations for the organization of new segregated institutions, white supremacist ideologies, legal rationalizations, the passing of codes to prevent Black people from being truly free, the extra legal violence and everyday racial terror. Or maybe it was during Jim Crow era, the early 1900s up to 1965, as organizations like the Night Riders and the KKK terrorized Black people and communities with violence and death, burning homes and businesses, bombing churches, lynching, maiming, torture, state and law enforcement sponsored murder, segregation of schools, churches, bathrooms, lunch counters, being shut out of jobs, redlining, restrictions on where we could live in cities and towns, and even sundown towns where black people were not welcomed after sunset or they'd be killed with impunity. I just shared with you what was going on from 65 to the 70s at the tail end of the civil rights and black power movements. Does the assassination of black leadership and the dismantling of the organizations and movements that created and forced change in America sound like a grand old time for black people? So maybe you think it's been great for us in this modern era because there's a Michael Jackson, or there was a Michael Jackson, a Michael Jordan, LeBron James, a Beyonce, Oprah, or even Obama. That because there are some black individuals doing well, that things are great for most black Americans despite the sinister continuation of policies like redlining, voter suppression, gerrymandering, environmental racism, civic engineering, where harmful, toxic, polluting industries and factories are specifically placed adjacent to black neighborhoods throughout the country, medical racism, with substandard treatment and services, lower life expectancy, higher infant mortality rates, the criminalization of the entire population of black Americans that I spelled out in our last episode, mass incarceration purposely engineered by the creation and changing of laws to specifically target black neighborhoods, combined with imbalance and concentrated patrol and surveillance of black neighborhoods, combined with racial profiling by law enforcement, higher instances of police brutality and the ever-present murders of innocent, unarmed black citizens. Does this sound like a great time? Please tell me when it's been particularly great for us. Even today, 2025, Trump and his minions are vehemently destroying black progress in history by removing safeguards, erasing history, denying our identity as black Americans under this guise of a colorblind, merit-based society. Then they have the nerve to act like they have the moral high ground when threatening to withhold funding and grants to American educational institutions and businesses under the guise of protecting Jewish students from anti-Semitism, while at the same time they're bullying, basically blackmailing these same institutions around the question of funding, demanding that they discontinue all programs that benefit the admissions of qualified and exceptional black students specifically. I don't know what caliber of black people they think they're dealing with. We see and understand what's happening. This passive-aggressive war on black progress by this administration has far more violent and lasting ramifications on black life in America than any Jewish students have endured on any campus. What this administration and ICE are doing to immigrant communities of color is more violent than any inconvenience any Jewish student has endured on any campus. We are not fooled or asleep. We will not let it go unchecked. And I'm done with clowns like Bill Maher and many of the guests he brings on his show always trying to tell black people their history or how much progress has been made, implying that we are over-exaggerating the extent to which white supremacist ideology still permeates throughout this nation and affects our daily lives. They love to rail against Hamas and support Israel, yet in 2025, the KKK and white supremacist organizations who have a long history of domestic violence in this country are coddled instead of outright destroyed. As a matter of fact, they give white nationalist domestic terrorists a voice on their talk shows. Don't talk to me about Hamas with disgust and disdain while at the same time holding hands with white nationalists and white supremacists in this country. Both Hamas and white nationalist groups need to be completely eradicated. But they won't say that because we have always been viewed as less than, even now in 2025. I'm telling you what I know. Talk is cheap. Some people only talk because they have a pair of lips. If they had to pay for it, they wouldn't talk so much. I say what I mean and mean what I say. Take it how you want. Hopefully citizens don't simply retreat to their safe corners and ideologies and instead open their minds, clean off the lenses through which they're traditionally viewed people, their country, and the world around them, and see life for how it truly is. Hopefully Americans come to grips with the reality that you've been told one lie after another since childhood. There's no need to be fearful. There's no need to reject what I'm saying. They are the masters of manipulation and control. The American public, you've been roofied. You've been drugged your entire life with false information. You've been sold a false reality. I challenge you to begin to question everything you've ever been taught. Matter of fact, let me just give you a few examples of what on the surface may seem like minor lies that you've been taught from your earliest days in school, but that are very significant when taken in combination with all the many white lies you believe. These lies, they aggregate to form the damning psychosis and false realities promoted by racism. These little white lies serve the purpose of skewing your vision and perceptions of the world from a black and white perspective in a major way. Let's look at something as basic and seemingly as innocent as the maps that are in every American classroom, in every American school. Did you know that even maps have been purposely distorted to make Americans, Europeans, white people appear more than, and black, Africans, other people of color less than? Yes, that means you Latinos and Hispanics and Asians and Arabs and immigrants from India. That means you, because many of you seem to be trying to be so-called white and often hold anti-black beliefs and feelings when many of you owe your own and your children's and grandchildren's citizenship to black Americans. The whole anchor baby legal status is due to the amendment created for the descendants of enslaved black peoples following the abolition of slavery. You're welcome. I keep telling you that it's black Americans who are the tide that lifts all boats. We are the greatest agents for change in this nation. Stop looking down your noses at us based on your acceptance of false anti-black tropes, stereotypes, and narratives that just aren't true. But let's move on. Here's the standard map you're all familiar with. Do you see how large they depict America and Europe to be? Then do you see how small they depict Africa and Asia and South America to be in comparison? I've asked you each episode if you think that the powers that be aren't intentional in every little aspect of the information they pass off to you as knowledge. I've asked you if you're not aware that everything they do is intentional, not accidental, from education and curriculum to what is taught, how it's taught, and why it's taught. They've been misrepresenting the world to you from the beginning. They've intentionally produced maps that are deliberately not shown in proportion to the scale of the actual size of the continents and countries of the world in order to subliminally give you a false sense of importance, pride, and confidence, down to your maps. Here's a real map, drawn to the correct scale of land and sea masses. Do you see how massive Africa is? Do you see how diminutive North America, South America, Europe, Asia are in comparison to Africa? Why do you think they all have been colonizing and robbing and plundering and looting the natural resources and defaming and creating confusion and strife in Africa for decades? I leave you with questions for you to find the answers to. I'm not going to spoon feed you everything. Stop being lazy citizens. Be knowledgeable, enlightened, and active citizens. Look into it yourself. Why have they purposely diminished and minimized the massive size of Africa in comparison to the US, Europe, Russia, and China? Why have they sought to strip Africa from being the cradle of all civilization and thought and theory and mathematics and religion and science and spirituality? The answers are an entire episode in and of itself. But let's move on. How about one of the most recognizable, most famous, most symbolic statues or monuments, not only in America, but in the entire world? The Statue of Liberty. You've all been taught that it's linked to Ellis Island and it represents the freedom of immigrants to come to this great land in search of a better life. Lazarus's poem, the lyrics, they literally inscribed on the Statue of Liberty's pedestal. Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Another deception, another complete and utter lie in an effort to rob black Americans of any semblance of pride and historical significance in America. The same thing that Trump and his minions like this Miller clown and his administration purging government agencies and the military of significance and achievements made by black Americans. This is no new phenomenon. It's been going on forever. We know how to handle it. We are very well experienced in the psychosis called racism. The Statue of Liberty has nothing to do with immigrants or immigration. The Statue of Liberty was commissioned in 1865 to commemorate the end of the institution of slavery in America. It represents the freeing of formerly enslaved black Americans from a life of bondage and the abolition of slavery in America. I'll give you a crash course. The Statue of Liberty was the brainchild of French historian Eduardo Labuye, who was a staunch abolitionist. And when the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1865, he proposed the idea of commemorating the end of slavery and the freedom of formerly enslaved black people in America with a monument. It was designed by French sculptor Frédéric Bartholdi and assembled in France, while the pedestal it rests on was built in America. And the original design was of Lady Liberty with a torch in her right hand, Lady Liberty enlightening the world, and broken chains in her left hand, the breaking of the chains of slavery by black Americans. But the French encountered funding issues for the project, and American financiers got involved. So these American financiers took major issue with the design, specifically with such a clear and overt acknowledgement of black freedom from slavery, represented by the chains. So they threatened to remove monetary support. Well, long story short, their wishes were granted because without their support, the Statue of Liberty wouldn't have been completed. So instead, Bartholdi placed chains at Lady Liberty's feet to symbolize the end of slavery and replaced the chains in her left hand with a tablet to represent the Declaration of Independence. And this little change in the design of the statue's production is just a microcosm of how American money is used to influence decision-making and narratives, from the creation of the Statue of Liberty right down through the ages to many of the decisions made in politics, economics, and societal issues today. So when you hear Trump talking about foreign aid and tariffs, understand it's all a part of a cynical game American politicians and corporations have been playing around the world in earnest since the end of World War II. Don't ever think America is being taken advantage of or being used by other nations. America uses the aid to interfere in and control nations around the world, much in the same way those American financiers manipulated the design, the tribute, and the message intended for the Statue of Liberty. The chains have always been there. They have been impossible to see from the inside or outside. Remember, I told you the French built the statue, but Americans built the huge pedestal that she stands on. And so you can't see the chains from the outside or the inside of the monument except from a helicopter or an aerial view. The chains have always been there at Lady Liberty's feet and are still there today because Bartholdi insisted. They've just been hidden in plain sight all this time, much like America has done with Black American history all along. Go visit the Statue of Liberty today, and finally you will hear the guides offering the truthful, accurate history of the monument. And a special thank you and kudos goes to Dr. Joy DeGroy, who challenged the U.S. Department of the Interior to acknowledge it and correct it. So I think it's been since like 2014 or 15, the rangers leading the tours finally tell the real significance of the statue. Prior to that, they literally lied to every visitor and to every American that toured the site. Imagine the extreme pride stolen from Black Americans based on those lies, when down through the decades and now a century, other Americans would tour and say how their ancestors are here because of what this statue represents. Just think about it. And there are many Black Americans today who don't even know this history. But this is what being Black in America has been: constant attacks on life, liberty, and even self-actualization. Racism is not only a mental illness, it's a crime against humanity. So that's two examples of lies and distortions of history. Next, they've told you for as long as you can remember, just like your maps, just like the Statue of Liberty, they've told you as long as you can remember that America was founded as a Christian nation. Yet another lie. I don't even got to do too much explaining for this. The founding fathers literally put it in the Constitution. The very First Amendment states Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. They prevented the government from establishing or endorsing any religion, ensuring a separation of church and state. Yet you've been taught and will argue to death that America is a Christian nation. Hell, let's take the deception even further. You know that picture of the dirty blonde or brown-haired man with blue eyes that hangs in most of your churches? Do I need to go any further? Do I need to spell it out? Yet another lie to give you a false sense of reality and belief in your superiority. I tell you, anti-black ideologies, beliefs, and feelings is a psychosis. Racism must be listed as a mental illness. There's no way around it. When you unravel the years, the decades, the centuries of illusions and delusions created and formed by white supremacist teachings and practices, it has truly traumatized European Americans to a far greater extent than many accept, understand, or acknowledge. You've been hoodwinked, tricked, fooled, bamboozled. This isn't about guilt, it's about healing. How are you going to heal individually or as a nation if you continue to deny the truth and fail to put in the work? There's an entire nation of citizens who need intense therapy. I don't need you to be sorry. We don't need your kids to be sorry. Your guilt or lack thereof doesn't do anything for Black Americans. It's about accepting truth and moving forward to destroy the mechanisms that allow this type of system to continue to exist today. And there's no more taking a backseat to other movements or groups of people. Black organizations, Black leaders, Black people, stop letting other people and other movements take over your movements. They always bastardize them and leave you in the dust. Look at the state of hip hop today. We've let corporations take it over and the art form has suffered immensely. You let them take over the meaning of woke and they've bastardized it to signify an approval of children's bodies being mutilated before they can even pee straight, or of human beings identifying as cats or anything else they put their minds to or need safe spaces for. Black people have never been granted safe spaces. We create them. You think Ruby Bridges didn't have anxiety walking into that school with all those hateful white mothers and fathers protesting outside the school, screaming slurs and spitting at her? There are pictures, even video footage, news footage. And that's what some of the present day resistance to teaching real American history is really about. They never know who was identified in those pictures and clips. It could be their neighbor, it could be their teacher, principal, mechanic, congressman, person, their mother, father, or grandparents. They don't want it to come back to haunt them while they're lying to you today, pretending like they're colorblind, moral, upright citizens. We Black Americans have always been the people who have catapulted domestic policy and attitudes of this nation forward when we formed like Voltron. History verifies this fact, no matter how much this administration attempts to erase and diminish it. We know our history. We are aware of our story, and we will continue to write our story. And this is no slight. This is no knock on Jews, LGBTQ community, women's groups, veterans, Latinos, immigrants, or any other subgroup of Americans striving for a better life. We have always supported the rights of these groups and others, and haven't always received the same solid support in return. We've taken a backseat for the past few decades as these groups have been given more prominence and priority over us. Not happening anymore. It's not about comparing and contrasting pain. It's just about the facts. The Black Holocaust took place on this soil, on these American shores, on this land. It's estimated that upwards of 18 to 25 million Africans, Black people, were forcibly kidnapped, human trafficked from their land, children torn from their mothers and fathers, wives stripped of their husbands, husbands denied the love of their wives, many perishing along the journey, just to be thrown overboard as shark bait. Their bones and spirits form an ancestral cemetery at the bottom of the oceans along the European transatlantic slave route. But those who survived the journey landed in various lands, islands of the West Indies and southeastern coast of the American colonies, where they were treated in the most grotesque, the most inhumane and brutal manners, stripping our ancestors of their humanity, their rights, their freedoms and liberties, their names, their language, their family bonds, their culture, their identity, their self-worth, their dignity. This government codified our existence to the status of property, chattel. This nation's prosperity built on our backs, not on imaginary American exceptionalism, but on the back of an economic system not of capitalism, but let's be more specific, but slave capitalism. Whether it be defined by slave labor or slave wage or both. From the founding fathers to the elite members of the original colonies or present states, wealthy American individuals, families, and corporations from the very beginning to this very moment in history have been built on the back of slave labor and slave wage capitalism. In the beginning, black Americans were forced to work for free labor capitalism, allowing American farmers, merchants, banks and bankers, insurance companies, transportation, shipping companies, and governments, both North and South, to reap astronomical profits at the expense of our ancestors. And today, not much has changed. You just fail to see it. Instead, you praise men like Trump, Elon Musk, and others who come from money, who inherited a place of privilege since birth and have increased their wealth exponentially. Not simply from their genius that some of you seem to attribute their success to, but from their participation and over-reliance on slave labor and slave wage capitalism. Now, I know some listeners are wondering what the hell I'm talking about. These same men you're praising for being patriots and outstanding businessmen and geniuses have built their empires on the backs of shafting American workers and workers from third world countries. What kind of patriot uses American workers to build success and then stiffs them out of wages and contracts and ultimately jobs? What kind of patriot hires American workers and unions to perform work when they fulfill the contract, repeatedly files for bankruptcy, and refuses to pay them? What American patriots refuse to pay American workers living wages and instead moves their companies overseas so that they can take advantage of even poorer people in third world countries? What kind of patriots are you hailing? I tell you, you've been drugged. Your drinks have been spiked. They've pumped you with hallucinogens. You're not thinking or seeing clearly. They've moved their companies not because they weren't already making immense profits, but because of greed. They don't care about you, the American poor, or working class citizens of this nation. They could care less about you or your unions, or your children, or your family, or your community, or your hopes and dreams. That's why they outsource jobs overseas instead of pay American workers a living wage. They want to pay slave wages so they can hoard all the profits for themselves, so they can become billionaires, not due to genius, but due to slave labor capitalism. They think and believe in their hearts and minds that you're less than them. They believe that they are special. It doesn't hurt their conscience one bit that American workers and families are suffering because of their decisions. They only care about their bottom line and overinflated egos because at bottom, they are small-minded men. Yet you worship them while they pee in your face. They pee in the fan and tell you it's raining. You've been lied to. You've been sold a bill of goods. Wake up. Or not. Either way, I'm going to speak the truth and present real facts. Gone are the days of us sitting quietly while our government seeks to diminish and erase the contributions of black Americans to this country's history, success, and prosperity. Gone are the days when we sit idly by while this government prioritizes the welfare of European Jews and Israelis over American-born black citizens of this country. This is our country. We built this nation. This is our land. The very soil is enriched by my ancestors' bloods and bones. The Jewish Holocaust occurred in Germany and other European nations. The Jewish Holocaust was horrible. The death, the destruction, the loss of life, the firing squads, the starvation, the ovens, the gas chambers. It was a tragedy. It must never happen again. Jewish people have a right to live and thrive in peace wherever they choose to locate. The Black Holocaust occurred on this land. I hear many of you crying, America first. I'm done with this nation prioritizing the support of foreign people over American-born and American-created and perpetuated issues. I've watched America create, bolster, prop up, fund, protect, coddle, arm, legitimize Israel to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars since its creation in 1948, while never even providing my ancestors with the 40 acres and a mule it promised. The Jewish Holocaust occurred in Europe, Germany, and the European Union that also committed atrocity against the European Jews should be footing that bill. They should be making amends to European Jews, not America. It didn't occur here. The Black Holocaust did. If America paid half as much attention to black Americans over the same period of time that it has been aiding and abetting Israel's existence and legitimacy in a foreign land, if America showed half as much goodwill to the descendants of American enslavement, the descendants of the Black Holocaust, which lasted far more than several years and directly affected triple, quadruple the amount of people, black Americans would be in great shape in this nation. I say America and Americans first. Black people are Americans. It's time that there's a real conversation about what black people have earned and what America owes, even as a token for its responsibility for the Black Holocaust that occurred here. We don't want or need your apologies or guilt. They do absolutely nothing for us. They are empty gestures. We demand the same actions, words back with policy and dollar signs and genuine, real support. Trump dismantled DEI and assistance to states, institutions, and agencies that have any ethnic-based incentives. Good. We don't need them because they were guises anyway to help others in a far greater number than it did us. Great. Let's deal with the Black Holocaust and its aftermath. 450 plus years on this American soil. They had one of their operatives gun down Malcolm because he said, forget civil rights. I'm taking the battle to the international courts and nations of the UN and present the case of the descendants of the Black Holocaust at the hands of the American government. America first. Let's deal with it. MAGA. You scream America first, but have this strange obsession with a Holocaust that occurred in Germany and grant unwavering support. Well, stop the hypocrisy. It's time for a real reckoning of the Black American Holocaust. Instead, you're once again actively seeking to erase our history. Present day, 2025, and the Trump administration is erasing some aspects of our history from their websites and institutions. More of the same, nothing we haven't seen or been exposed to already. You tried to teach me that the South lost the war? I don't believe you. It's just another American trick, an American ruse. Because the traitorous Confederate states supposedly lost, yet their flags continue to fly in both the South and the North. You tell me the South lost the Civil War, yet you erected monuments of Confederate leaders and soldiers throughout this country. You told me that the South lost the war, but you have named buildings, highways, and institutions after the traitorous leaders of the Confederate. Let's completely disregard that the Civil War was fought over slavery. Let's completely dismiss that fact. Let's just talk about patriotism, since that seems to be a word that resonates with most Americans. So the South, the Confederacy, organized, raised an army, picked up weapons in an effort to overthrow the U.S. government and to destroy these United States of America that everyone claims they love so much. And these traitors to America and their ancestors, continue to fly their flags and build their monuments. And you tell me the South lost the war. Do you see Reich flags flying in Germany? Do you see monuments to the Reich in Germany? Yes, it's taught in history because it is a part of German history. It's a part of the German story. But do you see them honoring Hitler or his generals or his party? I'm not drinking your Kool-Aid. I don't believe you. The Southern Confederate mindset, it continues to thrive in America. It's in corners of your White House, your Congress, your courts, your law enforcement agencies, your education, your medical institutions, your banks, your environmental policies, your prison industrial complex, your boardrooms, your everyday life and decision making. The anti-Black Confederate mindset was never eradicated. The KKK and its affiliates still exist in America today. White supremacy still exists in America today. But you're snatching up students and professors who voice support for Palestinians under the guise that they're supporting Islamic terrorists, Hamas, while this nation openly plays footsies with domestic Christian white supremacist terrorist groups. that are enemies of Black Americans. This is our history. This is the way America slaps us in the face time after time. I'm not MLK or Jesus. I don't believe in turning the other cheek. Let me illustrate the complete lack of respect that's often shown to us. They are so demonic in their thinking that they teach that the Black Holocaust, American slavery, was good for us. They don't feel guilt because they believe they did a good thing by enslaving Black people because they view us as less than human. That's how twisted that mindset is. These are the same white supremacist Confederates who often claim that the Jewish Holocaust never occurred, that what's been reported was grossly over-exaggerated. This is the deep psychosis we're continuously faced with. And while we're on the subject, I don't want to put all the onus on the South, because the North is just as diabolical and sinister and twisted in its history towards Black Americans. It was large Northern banks who are complicit in the horrors of slavery. Well-known names like Citibank, Bank of New York, Bank of America, Merchants Bank, Brown Brothers and Company. They were critical to the financing of slavery, and their fortunes rose dramatically from their involvement in the business of enslaving Black people. Many of the leaders and families of these banks are still celebrated today in their history. Some love to talk about the Southern slave owners. What about the Northern slave entrepreneurs? Though far from the fields of the South and its plantations stood the nation's premier cotton and sugar banks in Manhattan. These banks profited from the enslavement of Black people. Their fortunes derived from Black labor and gains from loans to other slave-based enterprises across the nation, from shipping to importing to insuring, to manufacturing, machining, milling, harvesting, warehousing, distilling. I could go on and on detailing the network of businesses that amassed extraordinary wealth from enslaving Black people, so much so that 200 years later they continue to exist and remain some of the most recognizable financial powerhouses today. These institutions' original founders, those who took the reins after them, and their heirs of the men grew up in white privilege afforded by Black enslavement. We're talking what today would be the equivalent of tens of billions of dollars in profit by these Northern banks, all controlled by the East Coast elite, some of the richest men in U.S. history, in fact, the world, whose occupations had nothing to do with the farms or plantations, but everything to do with exploiting a system that turned the forced, unpaid labor of Black people into even greater wealth for other elite white men. They made their wealth not on the plantation, but through it. In the world of slavery wealth, the planter isn't the most consequential character. It was and still remains the white man at the top of this capitalistic system who truly created it, financed it, stole from it, and preserved it. And you wonder why American workers are having similar issues today. Because this is how the system was designed to operate, to suck the blood of its workers, to hoard as much of the profits for themselves as possible while paying workers the least amount possible. I need everyone to become more informed. Read, research, study for yourself the corporate fortunes created by enslaved Black people and then stolen from enslaved Black people by elite white men and their families and corporations. Names rarely spoken today: Moses Taylor, Percy Payne, Anson G. Phelps, Alexander Brown and his sons James, George, and William. Their legacies live today in some of the corporations that dominate our economy even today. Corporations like New York Life Insurance, the mining company Freeport McMoran, Deutsche Bank, Volvo, Meyer and Emmanuel Lehman of Lehman Brothers Bank, George Peabody, August Belmont, agent of the famed Rothschild family, William E. Dodge, just to name a few. I challenge you to read The Stolen Wealth of Slavery, A Case for Reparations by David Montero. Don't tell me reparations aren't due when the descendants of these men and corporations continue to thrive today, presenting themselves as legitimate industrial and financial corporations based on wealth produced by generations of enslaved Black people that was illegitimately stolen from Black families. It's time we pull the curtain back on this system. We can't do it in one podcast, but we need a serious movement to present the case for reparations, not just from these companies and banks, but also from governments that profited. These United States of America, Great Britain, France, the Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, Denmark, and certain African nations need to be called to task on behalf of Black Americans. Enough with the continued disrespect and cover-up of the history of the horrors, practice, and profits from the enslavement of Black people in America and each of their complicity in it. So the onus doesn't just fall on Southern farmers and slave owners. The onus doesn't just fall on the Confederate States. The human rights violations of Black people in America from the beginning has been an equal opportunity sport, North, South, East, and West. A nation within a nation. That's what I aim to create. We see through the facade. The system as it's currently constructed will never do right without extreme pressure and resistance and removal of the old power elite from the political, corporate, and banking worlds. We're on to you. We don't want your apologies. We could care less about your sense of guilt or lack thereof. This is business. Business that's long overdue, and we have the receipts. A nation within a nation, sent to transform this nation into a more perfect union. Until next time, God bless and keep the faith. Truth always comes to light. Be that.